Well, this engineering lover used to build model rockets when she was in school, and she has always been a bit of a tinkerer. Angela Saini then went on to do her masters in engineering at the Oxford University and is now an award-winning science journalist. She has just brought out her superb book of first-hand reportage on science in India. It's called The Geek Nation. It's full of unforgettable characters and gripping stories, and it looks at India's scientific potential and how it squares its spiritual soul with its hardcore rationality and science. We were talking about GM foods. You went to meet Dr. Pravendranath and Vandana Shiva. This is a topic that really interests me because GM technology can be a solution to our food crisis. At the same time, it has another face. So your
That's right. GM is one of these wonderful technologies which was developed in order to solve the ongoing problem that we have, which is we have a limited space and yet the population is always growing, and that's true globally. So in America, GM foods are so widespread, they're grown, so many different varieties are grown that you almost can't live in that country for a week without consuming some kind of genetically modified crop. In Europe, on the other hand, it's hardly grown at all, and there is huge opposition to it. GM foods have to be labelled. So it just goes to show that a technology that is promising in its own right and has something to offer farmers can get involved in politics, and the fears of the public can feed into that and then create concerns. And there are valid concerns on both sides. There are risks associated with genetically modified foods, but at the same time there are huge benefits to be had there. And India is in the process of trying to sift through those benefits and drawbacks.
Like GM foods, another area that's misunderstood is nuclear power. And here I'd like to read, the World Nuclear Association predicts that by 2100, there could be at least 2,000 reactors around the world. And one nation that's poised to build new generation large-scale modern thorium-powered nuclear reactors is not the US, not Russia, but India. And we still see nuclear power as a big villain.
We do, to some extent, although the government is very much behind it. World governments have been. Of course, I wrote that before the Japanese accident. But even then, what happened in Japan was freakishly rare. I've been commentating on this since the accident happened, and my view is that we all live with a certain degree of risk. Nuclear power, because it is one of the most heavily regulated industries in the world, if not the most heavily regulated and monitored, is actually relatively safe in terms of how many people it kills compared to other forms of energy generation. So given that risk and given how carefully we monitor it, I think we have reason to be confident about it. And India, I don't think, has shown any signs of scaling back its nuclear program.
But is nuclear power really a solution for our electricity shortage?
Well, the thing is, electricity shortages are huge, and anybody who lives in India knows that, because power's always going out. There are huge parts of the country that still don't have enough electricity. So given that you need a big solution, not small solutions, but a really big solution to meet that shortfall, nuclear is wonderful. And that's the view of nuclear scientists, clearly. So in the book, I meet these researchers who are working on a new kind of energy generation based on thorium. So generally, we use uranium in nuclear reactors. Thorium is so abundant in India. It's almost the most abundant fuel we have. So it makes perfect sense to be using that. The problem is the technology is tough, but once it's developed and once these generators go online, it will take a while. It could take a decade or so before that happens. There will be this wonderful new source of energy, which happens also to be relatively cleaner and safer than uranium power.
You know, one of the most amusing chapters in the book, which we have to touch upon, is Chariots of the Gods, which looks at how India is a country that exists on the one hand in the Middle Ages, and on the other hand it has, with all its pseudo-scientific beliefs, and on the other hand it has all its high-end scientific and tech advancements. It's also a country that's quite comfortable living with this conflict, like the scientist who consults an astrologer to fix the wedding date of his daughter.
I can't help feeling, I'm not a religious person myself, but my mum is, for example. I have lots of religious believers in my family and among my friends. There is something about spirituality and philosophy and superstition as well, which even if we know rationally that, you know, crossing our fingers for luck may not make us lucky, we just can't help it. There's something in human nature that makes us feel this way. And I can't help it myself. I cross my fingers for luck, even though I know that probably doesn't mean anything. So I believe, unlike some scientists, especially in Britain, who believe that science and religion are completely incompatible, that you can't be a scientist and be religious, I take the view that there is space for religion in current scientific thinking. We don't know everything. I mean, outside our ideas about the universe, there is so much there yet to be explored. And in that territory, perhaps there are things that we don't know about.
I'd like to talk about Dr. Sujata because she's a Chennai-based person and the work that she's doing.
I was so inspired by the work of Sujata Narayanan. She is a tuberculosis researcher here in Chennai, and when I was writing the chapter on medical research, I went to meet her because she has written some really groundbreaking scientific publications with international collaborators on why certain people get infected by TB and not others. And she's been doing this work for years and years. She told me that there is a real lack of volunteers, healthy volunteers, to provide sputum samples. So when you're doing research on people who are infected with TB, she has hundreds of samples from those patients, but you need healthy samples to compare it to. So she did the test on herself. She inserted the tube inside her, took the sputum sample, and then did the test. And one day, one of those tests revealed that there was a TB bacteria in the tube, which meant she might have almost accidentally infected herself, which was devastating. The treatment for tuberculosis is a 6-month cocktail of drugs, incredibly grueling, and it takes a real toll on your body. And for her, that toll was that she contracted diabetes. She believes the diabetes was perhaps triggered off by the use of these drugs. And she lives with that to this day, the fact that her research, her commitment to her science triggered off diabetes in her body. And yet that hasn't dimmed her love of science even a bit, which was such an inspiration to me.
Yeah, very inspiring, much like your story, because you see, Angela at 30, she contributes to The New Scientist, Science, Wired, and The Economist. She's a regular reporter on BBC radio science shows, including Digital Planet. She was named European Young Science Writer of 2009, and earlier in 2008, a show on European TV, she won a European TV News Award. So you make me feel like this little dust mote that's floating.
Oh, no, don't say
Is
that.
This nurture or nature?
Well, I wouldn't even like to think that I'm anywhere near as impressive as people like Sujata, who devote their lives anonymously to their work. It's so incredible, the kind of work these Indian scientists and engineers are doing, and all I'm doing is observing them. So I feel like the small person at that end.
You know, when Anurima asked me to do this chat with you, I looked at her in horror and I said, no way, you know, what do I know about science? But I'm really glad I took on this challenge because I've learned so much in the course of reading this book. I love your style, which is so effortless and witty, breezy, at the same time very, very insightful and penetrative. I think, you know, you should be writing books for school children to kindle a deeper interest, because this would make great reading for, you know, 9th and 10th standard school students. And we don't have very good science journalism in our country today. So I'd like to congratulate you once again and tell you what an absolute pleasure it's been.
Thank you so much. And I really hope this is a book that's read by everyone, not just those who read popular science, but people like you who want to peek into that world of Indian science.
Well, thanks very much. Thank you. Thanks for joining us.